slow down. You got lots of time. It took me 10 years to feel confident and comfortable enough to actually go out on my own and build my own farm from scratch. Where do you put the greenhouse? Like, it could have been there, it could have been here. It's easy access to the kitchen, short footsteps, which is nice. The chefs probably appreciate that. My biggest advice to anybody who wants to start a farm is to start small, know where you're going. And even then, it's still hard. It's still not easy because things are gonna happen.
All right, so if I want to start a farm, I'm someone that comes to you, where would we begin?
For me, it's really about asking yourself why. I think there's a number of different ways anyone could start a farm, and I think really like understanding your context is really the most important piece. Having a deep understanding of why you do want to farm. You know, when you have a good why and you understand it, you can kind of, I guess, bear anyhow or figure out exactly how you want to do it. There's a number of different ways, but I think really understanding your context. What do you have to work with? What's your situation? You know, what's your vision for your farm? What do you want the farm to do for you? That's where I would start, is really kind of developing your context, thinking about it holistically. And then going from there, you know, what resources do you have available to you? Really assessing like all the capital available, whether not just financial, but just, you know, what kind of social, cultural, experiential capital do you have? What resources can you leverage to build your farm? Do you have access to land? Things like that. But I think really getting a good vision and getting a good understanding of why is, I think, the most important thing. And then figuring out the how becomes a lot easier later.
Why? What was the why for your farm?
Great question. For me personally, it's really about self-reliance. It's about a lifestyle, and we've really built our farm around that. You know, economics is obviously a part of it and making a living, but you know, lifestyle was really important. Being self-sufficient, being able to grow our own food, not being dependent on like a global industrial food system or, you know, external factors that you can't really control. Being self-sufficient, and to me, I just love the lifestyle. I was in love with working with my hands, being outside, being able to grow your own food for yourself. To me, it's a great way to make a living and have a lifestyle doing it. So, you know, that's really the driving factor for me. And now I really like the education and training side of it too, and really help develop more farmers, build more farms, really changing the paradigm in food and farming. You know, one of the big drivers for me too was just kind of our Costco-like culture that we have, where it's just big box stores and food from central places and locations, and, you know, just changing the culture, having a different culture where we're more in touch with how we grow our food. We're more in touch with where our food comes from. You know, we're more in touch with kind of the culinary arts and putting those things together at the same time. And that's what drives me. That cultural paradigm and changing the way we're living. You know, where I am in Ontario, we're big box plaza after big box plaza right beside all these neighborhoods. And, you know, my, I guess, big vision or big dream is to see farms as like the center of communities, right in the center of developments, whether it's urban or rural. And just that changing that paradigm is, I think, really what motivates me the most every day.
Right on. I couldn't agree more with that vision of things and that ambition. Speaking of the whys, today we're at the old mill. It's winter time, I'm sure people can tell. But we're going to kind of walk around this farm and use it as a reference for talking about starting a farm, as well as talking about starting your farm, Ryan. But real quick, I see the restaurant, the old mill, behind us. Could you talk about what you see as the why of this farm, as far as you understand it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's cool about here is, like, I think that is the why. You know, it's not necessarily, I guess, what JM's famous for is, you know, the 1.5 acre bio-intensive market garden, which obviously is here, but it's not just about economics. It's about working, having that connection with the chef, with the restaurant, running a farm-to-table operation and growing food specifically for that. So it changes the context a little bit, I guess, for the old mill here. in that you're not really growing crops in terms of like yield per square foot to make, you know, the highest return on your investment per bed. This is more working closely with that chef, working with the restaurant, attending to the needs of the restaurant and what's the demand and the supply with the restaurant, and trying to dial that in so you can grow what they want and when. And I think it's cool. I think I've done that before. When I was working at a college in Ontario, we had a farm to table restaurant, and I ran a 1 acre market garden that fed the restaurant as well. So similar context, and it just changes the way you do your operation a little bit. It changes the way you set things up. You have to think about the day-to-day flows from the field to the kitchen. You want to make sure that like the chefs are integrated into the planning process. And it's going to just determine how you set up your infrastructure. You know, you want chefs to be able to access the fridge. And so designing your elements on the farm so that they fit kind of with those flows, they fit with the people who are operating with it every day. It's not your traditional farm where, you know, you have a 1 or 2 acre market garden in some rural homestead or field that's like, you know, an hour from the city or half an hour from your market. Your market is right where you are farming, which is really cool. So you have these different, I guess, design parameters or different ways that you can assemble those pieces together, I think. So, you know, having the garden right on the doorstep of the kitchen is pretty cool. And having greenhouses so you can have production in the winter to serve the chef. And then from a farming perspective, you know, really like changes your whole planning in the winter and throughout the season, because you're really trying to meet the demand of the chefs. And so it's really cool I find it fascinating to be able to put the pieces of infrastructure together so that they all kind of flow and work. And, you know, you got to think about how the restaurant works with the farm together. And so there's this kind of holistic framework, kind of holistic approach you kind of have to take to it. And it's not just making as much money as we can per bed.
Yeah. So actually, speaking of all that, you want to kind of take a walk and look at some of the infrastructure here and talk about, well, basically, let's say you've figured out your why. Mm-hmm. I know that you also have to, you know, consider your team and all that, but let's get to that right after. But let's talk a little bit about finding a land and maybe infrastructure.
Sure.
Want to do that?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, let's go.
Cheers.
We can just walk together towards the primary building of the old mill farm. So what do you see here in terms of site design choice and
well, like what's great is the restaurant's right there. There's easy access to the greenhouse, to the fridge. Everything's right on the doorstep with the kitchen, which is nice. I think the chefs probably would have preferred not to walk outside, but I mean,
especially in winter,
you got to design with what you have to work with, right? I mean, having a separate building or attaching something to this, it really depends. It's about taking what you have and working with what you have to make it function. And just thinking about those little nuances, I think, is a big part when you're planning and designing a farm. Is, you know, where do you put the greenhouse? Like, it could have been there, it could have been here. You know, why is it there? It's easy access to the kitchen. It's quick.
Yeah. Short
footsteps, which is nice. The chefs probably appreciate that, and especially in the winter with the cold house being there. And, you know, you have, what I like too is they run a little market stand off the side, and it's really been integrated well. Like what JM has with growers, he has a showroom there with growers for tools. They run a market off the back of the building, which is right next to, you know, the kitchen. It's inviting for the public. That's a big part, I think, of the why here too, is you really want to bring the public in and showcase what we can do as small scale growers and market gardens and this farm to table approach. So, you know, I know that the whole lay of the land here is very much like a park land, and it's inviting to the public. It's right in a public spot, like right on the river with the mill, and it's easy for people to access and see and walk around. And like, these things are important, right? You wouldn't normally do that on every farm. So access is a big thing.
Yeah. And what about on your farm? What went into choosing your site and then continuing to set it up from there?
Yeah, for us, a big thing was location. So we're actually kind of between these two little towns, just north of like a very major highway. And so for us, we wanted a central location that we were close to the markets. And so, you know, we're 2 minutes from the 401. We're between two small towns, which is great. So we have the markets right at our doorstep, and we're in this nice little like green belt. But we're 5 minutes each way from neighborhoods and development and towns and markets. So that was important. And then also just kind of having the right size of land and a big enough house that can fit all of us. And so, you know, it was kind of just by chance, to be honest. My friend and I, who I've partnered with on our farm, they were looking to buy a house with some property. We had a farm developing already at a different location. And so it was about finding something that was size and scale that met kind of the requirements of not just the farm operation, but for the guys who were going to be the homeowners and the property owners as well. And so we really had to think of it holistically. Like, it worked for the farm, but it also worked for them in terms of, this is going to be a cool place to live. This is the size of the property they want to have to live. And now we can do a lot together, because it's not just me farming there and living there. There's two other homeowners, and we all kind of live in this little, the hippie dream is alive and well, you know?
What kind of advice do you have for people who are looking for land, but they don't have money? And I'm just imagining here that that's probably the primary limitation for a lot of people in terms of what land to get is its costs. What can you say about that?
Yeah, for sure. I think access to land's a big thing. Not everybody, especially these times, can afford land or property. We started our farm, like, we don't own the land, we don't own the property, but we have enough, I guess, social capital with the guys that we're working with that, you know, they both owned houses, and they could afford to sell their houses and buy this place. They shared a similar dream. You know, one of them doesn't want to farm, he's got his own business, but the other guy wants to farm and develop the property, but we're all happy to be living in the country. I just happen to be wanting to like run a farm. And so that relationship, I guess that social capital that I had allowed me to develop that. And, you know, you don't always need to have the financial capital to go out and buy land in a traditional way. There's lots of people with land to rent. You know, you might have family or friends that want to move to the country and buy a house, but they don't know what to do with the property. And for us, we've really developed a good relationship where, you know, without a farm on the land, you know, they have pretty significantly high property taxes. So me coming in and actually building a farm and farming the property lowers their property tax. So it's a win-win for them. I get an opportunity to run a farm business off there, and then together we all manage the property together. So we've built kind of this holistic kind of relationship where we all kind of have our own roles in terms of managing the property, but I'm able to run a farm business off of it and then support some of the property development and work with them to manage the space. And we all kind of just figure out how to make it work. So you have to be creative. You know, if you're looking for land and you don't have the funds to traditionally go out and buy something with property, you got to be creative. You either got to find some friends or family who are kind of willing to play with you. Or approach some people that have land that are willing to rent it out. There's lots of farmers, and there's lots of pieces of land. Municipalities too have land that is being unused. And so to me, if you don't have that, you got to kind of build some social capital and build a network or talk to the right people, put some ideas out there, find some partners that are willing to work with you, and you have something to offer in terms of, hey, I can build a farm here, we can run a business, and then those people might back you in terms of buying a property for themselves, and you guys sharing the resources. So for us, it's about sharing resources and just finding the ways to do that and being creative. So
yeah, how do you ensure longevity and stability in that case? I'm imagining a lot of people are, they're hesitant to rent because they're thinking to themselves, they don't own it, they can lose it at any time. Well, I guess, what are your thoughts on that kind of thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, that's just the risk you have to take, I guess. If you're not going it on your own, then you have to make some sacrifices in order to make it work. So it really just depends on how bad you want the dream. You know, for me, it was a perfect storm. Like, I got into a partnership with these guys right at the right time when we were trying to start a farm and they were looking to move to the country. But you have to, like, I'm never going to own the property, but I don't really invest a lot into permanent infrastructure. And so if I ever had to pick a farm up and move it, I could. Lots of the tools, equipment and things, tarps, machinery, we put a lot of things on wheels. We have any infrastructure for the farm is a shipping container, so it could be moved later if we had to. So yeah, have I put some resources into the property? Yes, but that was, you know, it's paying me back already. Like, we had to dig a pond. I can't take that away, but you know, I shared in the process of funding it and building it, and now we use that pond to irrigate the market garden. So my return on that investment has already kind of come back, and you just have to be willing, I guess, to think outside the box and, you know, be able to make a few sacrifices to know that, you know, if you're not there forever, then how do you design it so that you could maybe get it to a point where then you could fund it to find your own land later, and, you know, maybe you spend 5 years there, 10 years there, and then think about how you're going to move it later. And then maybe it's you build the relationships enough where it does work and you can stay there long enough. But that's kind of it's something that's in the back of my head all the time is, you know, if they ever did sell or if we ever did have to move, you have to kind of have a backup plan. But it's about having building those relationships and having clarity with the people who you're working with and understanding kind of what the deal is, making sure everyone is on the same page so there isn't any surprises later. That's important. And so, like, having those conversations up front early and often is really good, and making sure there's like a shared vision and an understanding of what you can and can't do and kind of what the rules of engagement are is what I would recommend. And just being clear about the context, being clear about what you're doing, that's important.
Absolutely. How about we head inside this building and kind of talk about what people should be thinking about in terms of setting up their infrastructure, whether it's wash pack, storage, tooled, you know, all that. All right, we're now inside the wash pack, the cool room. It's attached to the greenhouse here at the old mill. What kind of things should people be thinking about when they're setting up their infrastructure or they're assessing existing infrastructure on a property? Why don't we talk about that?
Sure. I think a couple things you want to think about is scale and flow. So, you know, for us at our place, we have a 40-foot shipping container that we converted into a wash pack station because we didn't have a building to modify and we didn't want to build something from scratch. It was also mobile. If it ever needs to get picked up and moved, we can move it later. So modular infrastructure is important, I think. It's a big investment to build something from scratch, especially with the cost of materials these days. If you can use something that, like a shipping container, or something that's easily built and can be moved later, even better. And then I think the scale of your operation really depends on it. Like, you're not going to have a small 40-foot wash pack for something like a 8-acre market garden like JM has at FQT, and you know, you're going to have a different wash pack here like they have at the old mill than what we have. You know, this obviously is going to exist here for a while, and so making a building like this makes sense, and then having it right where you know, the veggies are coming out or however you're using it. So it's obviously attached to the greenhouse, which is nice, and it probably has something to do with just the systems, right? If you have power and energy and water connected to your greenhouse, it makes sense to have a building attached to that as opposed to having two separate buildings running materials and things like that. So it's about integration, I think, too. Like, if you can conserve energy through integration, I think that's super important. And so having kind of a central hub for the farm where you kind of have all your energy, water, power, things like that makes sense. And I think that's part of what they've done here. They obviously couldn't build off the mill or the restaurant, and so having this kind of central hub is important. And JM has that at FQT as well. If you've ever seen that wash pack, it's it's attached to a greenhouse as well, which is passive solar. And so they've stacked functions, right? Which is an important principle, I think. The more functions you can stack, the better. So like this functions as a wash pack, but they have the refrigeration here, but it's also the head house of the greenhouse. There's also some tools hanging out here. It's access for the chefs. And so you can see how they're stacking functions a little bit. I might have had a separate building for the wash pack just because of the tools and the flow in and out of here. But you work with what you have. You work with what your layout is. And I think this works well for them by the looks of it.
Yeah, and at your own farm, I know you have your current iteration of a setup. Are there things that you also plan to be evolving over time? And then also, what can you say to people thinking about their farm, about like doing things stepwise, starting small, building up, and that kind of way of thinking? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, for us, it was we slow rolled it on purpose. When we were starting our farm, we didn't have a whole bunch of financial capital available to us to just build everything at once really fast, even though we did do that. But we kind of chunked it out. And so, I had a job teaching and running a farm while we were building ours. And then, my partners, they both run their own businesses and work during the day as well. And so we had to build it on the side while we were working full-time jobs. And so we really slow rolled how we did it. And this is the advice I would give to anybody starting out now, is have a long-term vision of where you want to get to, and then reverse engineer how you get there right back down to like the very first step, and then have a good plan. And when you have that plan, then you can break it into small chunks, and then you can bite off what you can chew when you can do it. And so for us, time was a limiting factor because we were building it on the side, and money was a limiting factor. And so we put a little bit of money away each month into an account, and then we knew what we needed in terms of like key infrastructure. So, digging a pond, setting up irrigation, building the garden beds, getting a wash pack. And so, we're able to quantify those things and see how much money we need to purchase them. And then we can spend the time like looking for those things in the most kind of cost-effective way. We probably spent 6 months looking for a shipping container that was just right for us at the right price. And, not being in a hurry is a big advantage because you're still working, we're still funding the project slowly and then building it out when we have time. And then that way it mitigates a lot of the risk, and you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket in one go and try to make it work. It's really easy to get burnt out fast trying to build your farm with the pressure of also having to produce. And so my biggest advice to anybody who wants to start a farm is to start small, know where you're going, and then chunk it out into small portions.
We're gonna move due to that.
I know, that's why I stopped talking.
So I have another question. Okay. This time, it's about the social aspects of starting a farm, and what I mean specifically is, who are you gonna team up with? Is it a solo operation, or do you have partners? Is it, is it your wife or husband or partner? Is it your kids? Tell me, what should someone be thinking about there, and also your own setup. Who are your partners? Who are you doing this with?
For sure. I mean, I would say choose your partners wisely, and also when you are forming a partnership with anyone, be very clear on where you're going together, what your roles are, what the responsibilities are. Know that things change all the time. Change is forever the constant, right? And circumstances change, your context change, people's lives change. And so you have to have a strong enough vision and a strong enough, I think, relationship and partnership with the people you're forming a partnership with. And having that clarity, I think, is super important. With us, our partnership has evolved over the few years that we've had the farm running. And I think part of it was just finding that niche in how we can work together, who can do what, who's capable of doing what. And people's circumstances changed too. We started our farm during COVID, so it was a strange time already. And then the next 2 years, a lot of things changed in our lives as partners. And so that changed kind of the nature of the relationship in terms of how we were farming together and who was kind of responsible for what. And so having the ability to, I think, be able to adapt and be a little bit resilient, but also having enough strength to work on those relationships, to have those conversations when they need to be had, and just being very clear about what your goals are as an individual, as a farm. Really having a clear context and a good partnership agreement up front is integral. And the one thing that I've seen that's the hardest part, I think, about farming is that social cohesion, that cultural aspect. I think a lot of people get into starting a farm with a very romantic view, and don't get me wrong, it's very romantic. I feel the same way. It's why I farm. But you really have to consider that the social side of things. It's super important. It's super important that you have strong relationships with the people you're working with, and just really understanding and being able to adapt and let go of maybe some of your ambitions or ego to a degree, and thinking about how to make the whole work. It's where I am with our farm. We have 3 guys sharing one big house, so 3 families on 10 acres, which is a lot of room for all of us. And you can imagine with 3 dudes, there's obviously like some egos and things there, but we managed to make it work. And it's about, I think, mutual respect. It's about communication. And I think it's about just like working together. And I've seen on other farms, that's kind of the biggest hang up, is the social cohesion's not there. There's too many people, I think, working in silos that are trying to do their own thing in a shared space. And I think it's about like really having that big picture vision that's shared amongst the group that are there, and then finding ways to make it work. Communication's super important. It's one thing I really learned actually working at FQT and at Jean Martin's farm is, we had a group of 10 people from all over the place running this big operation, and there's pressure to produce, and because we're running such a big operation, but you're only as strong as kind of that whole that binds you together. And so having those focus on those relationships and that communication, and making sure that people understand each other, and building that social cohesion, I think, it's about putting effort and energy to fill that cup, right? To fill that social capital cup, and not being able to think as an individual, being able to think kind of as a community, and think as kind of a whole, and having a whole that binds everybody together, that separates out, I think, the individuality is important. And then the individuality that you do have makes it an interesting place to be, right? And I think as long as you have that kind of common goal and kind of common vision, you're doing yourself some favors. But it's tricky. I've seen lots of operations, not just in farming, but devolve and degenerate because people can't get along. There's not a shared common goal. It's one thing I kind of had to integrate when I was working at the urban farm at the college I was working at is, we had this academic program while also trying to run an urban farm, and having volunteer students come in and work on the farm, and then connecting it with like a culinary program and a farm to table restaurant. And you had all these moving parts and all kinds of different people working in different silos and departments with different goals and visions and bosses to answer to. But we had to kind of put together this whole thing of this farm to table restaurant and this kind of cohesive unit, and having kind of this main goal, this kind of North Star that you're all moving towards helps. And I think having everybody on that table and at that table, I think, is important. So it's certainly something you don't want to overlook. And I would be putting systems in place to make sure that, that you're doing something about that, and focusing on building that kind of social capital, because that's the foundation that holds everything up.
I like how you said, context changed for people. It makes me think of, well, not only my own past, but the many, early 20-something farmers out there that are really gung-ho, and they're creating, different cooperative ventures together. And it's all, again, really, romantic and beautiful. Yeah. But for sure, a lot of times, I think people run into that problem of things change in their lives. And what I'm trying to say is, well, what do you say to like the 19-year-old that wants to start a farm, and especially if they want to make a big team of other people, all really young? Do you have any kind of special advice for them?
Yeah, slow down. Slow down. You're young. You got lots of time. It took me 10 years to feel confident and comfortable enough to actually go out on my own and build my own farm from scratch. And that was after, a year working with Jean Martin, 5 years working at a college. I would say go out and taste a whole bunch of other farms first and go get some experience. Build that experiential capital. Have a go at a bunch of different places. Find the people who are doing what you want to do and go work with them. Go work with them for free, go volunteer on their farm, get a paid position on their farm, learn from them. There's so much nuance and risk in starting a farm. It's such a different business than other businesses because you're working with Mother Nature, you're working with a lot of unpredictability. And especially if you're going out and you want to do it with a group of people and a group of friends, go to some farms that have groups of people and groups of friends and see how that social dynamic works in different contexts, and learn what works, what doesn't, and get some experience, because then when you go to do something on your own, it's going to be less risky. You're going to have less headaches. It's going to hurt less. You're going to have more clarity and more experience and more knowledge about what to do, how to manage those things. There's so many variables that go into starting a farm and running a farm, and then keeping it successful. I can't say enough things about going and getting a whole bunch of experience first, and go find the things that are like driving you. You don't necessarily need to do it yourself. You can have just as much. This goes back to the why. Like, ask yourself why you want the farm to begin with, and then go find those reasons somewhere else first, because you might find that you actually don't want to run your own farm. You just want to go travel around working on other farms and getting those different experiences. And that's something that it took me a bunch of different experiences to really realize what it is I wanted and how I was going to do it. I know when I started thinking about starting my own farm at like 30, I went and worked on a bunch of different places, and my whole perspective of the farm that I wanted or what I could do changed. And it took 5 to 7 years of learning and talking to people and trying ideas out and having different experiences and learning from them, and then finally putting something together that I felt confident enough that it would be successful. And even then, it's still hard. It's still not easy, because things are going to happen. Like COVID happened, and you lose your job, and you suddenly have to like depend on the farm for an income, and that was never the plan. And life changes and things change, and there's all these external factors that are happening on you. You got to really build some resilience into yourself and build some knowledge, skills, and abilities into yourself before you want to take on a beast of your own, because it is a beast, and it's a lot to think about. It's a lot to manage. And it's not just about growing the vegetables or growing crops or livestock or anything like that. The other half of the equation is you have to learn how to be an entrepreneur. You have to learn how to be a business person and do books and finances and sell and market and brand and all those things. There's so much that goes into starting a farm. I couldn't imagine starting it at 19 or 20 or even in the early days. Go find those experiences, go learn from some people, take a course, read some books, gain some knowledge, and then when it feels like you've almost mastered it and you have nothing left to look for, then I would consider starting a farm.
Sage advice, Ryan. It makes me think, just as a closing thought from myself, of I'm imagining a 19-year-old starting a construction company.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that if you're 19, you know, and you're really gung-ho to quit your dreams or anything, but you know, like it makes a lot of sense to build up skills, knowledge, experience over some time before you make your own, because you don't necessarily need to make your own.
I mean, unless you got money and time to burn, then go for it. Not everybody has that luxury. I think, you know, and you've had some farm experiences that have come and gone, and things that have worked and not worked. And, you know, I always say it's not the end, it's not where you're going. It's the journey that you take to get there is the best part anyways. So like, don't try to get to, I have a farm, or I want to start a farm tomorrow. Like, make a journey of it, because the journey is actually the adventure. And then once you do have a farm, it's a whole new journey, and you're never actually going to get to where you want to go in your mind. It's just, you know this, it's iteration after iteration after iteration of just getting better and better and better, and your farm evolves and changes, and you can create that later. But go on a journey first and learn and get some experience, and fail fast. Fail a whole bunch of times first, so you're not failing on your own dime.
And Ryan, I believe you've come prepared with something to offer our viewers today to help them out. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're giving you a free resource, 10 things to consider before you start your own farm. Should be a link in the description, so check that out, have a read, and good luck if you're starting your own farm.